Hello again to all of our friends out in Facebook land, out on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. We are back for another fantastic interview with a wealth of knowledge from ParenTween Connection trusted expert Lisa Woomer. Lisa, thank you for being with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share this with everyone.
And I am thrilled to have folks participating in our first roundtable. If this is the first video that you're checking in on, and I haven't had a chance to meet you, my name is Clarissa. I'm the founder of ParenTween Connection. And our goal here is to create community for parents, primarily of teens and tweens, as well as like grandparents, aunts and uncles, and mentors. Connect them to each other for moral support, knowing that they're not alone, but also to connect you to professionals like Lisa. So Lisa is a nurtured heart approach trainer and consultant. And so she has a lot of wisdom to share with us about how to bring more good to our kids, have better relationships with our kids. And so, Lisa, why don't we start? For those, let's presume that folks haven't heard of the nurtured heart approach yet, because I know I hadn't prior to meeting you. Let's start there. What is nurtured heart approach? Where did it start? How are you involved? How'd you become a trainer? All that jazz.
Okay. So the nurtured heart approach was created by someone by the name of Howard Glasser, and he was a licensed family therapist, and he all of the techniques that he was learning just weren't really working for the really challenging children. And so he kind of was getting frustrated, but he dug deep and he remembered back when he was a challenging child himself, that what was really big for him was that flow of energy between himself and his parents. So he realized that the more he acted up, the more energy he got from them. And so he thought, okay, what can I do with that information? And that's how the Nurtured Heart was born. He came up with these 3 stands. And the 3 well, first of all, let me back up too. And I became a trainer myself because I was working at a preschool as a director of the preschool. And a lot of my teachers were, stressed out going, I have this one student that takes up all my time, and I can't get anything else done because I'm constantly, worrying about this child, whatever. And so I just knew that the more fire you give to that child, the more the flames go. And I was like, this is not working. I need to find something. And so we stumbled across the Nurtured Heart approach. And so I became a trainer so that I could help my teachers. And then in return, it actually helped me even be a better parent.
Right.
So, but anyway, so going back to what the Nurtured Heart approach really is it's based on 3 stands. And the reason why he chose stands is because it's something solid. You're not wishy-washy. This is it. You're doing this and that's it. And it's not something
taking a stand.
Yeah, like it's taking a stance. That stand number 1, you will refuse to give energy to negativity, and you'll not reward negativity with your energy, connection, or relationship. Okay, so that's stand 1.
Okay.
Stand 2 is you will relentlessly energize positive behavior. You'll relentlessly notice the positive in your children. And you will energize and nurture through firsthand experiences of success. So that's stand 2.
Okay.
And then stand 3, you'll be absolutely clear. You will set clear limits. A child knows, toe is over the line, a toe is over the line. You're playing a basketball game. Everyone knows the rules. It's no surprises, and you're consistent with it all the time. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what the Nurtured Heart approach is. But you can't do any one of those things without the other. And also, like if you have, let's say you have more than one child, you can't just do this with one child. You have to do it with all the children. You know what I mean? Because they'll start to notice, like, wait, whoa, what's happening here? Why is mom talking to them like this and not to me? And so you have to kind of just make a decision, take a stand, and just go with it. And the thing I love about this is that it's not something where it's like, okay, if they do this, then I have to do this. It's like, it's all comes from the heart. It's like you're when we get to stand 3, they instead of giving timeouts, which essentially everything is a timeout, but we like to call it a reset instead.
Okay.
And it's not something that takes time. Like, it doesn't have to take forever. You know, they don't lose privileges. Like, they just lose the energy and the connection in the moment. And then as soon as they're back on track, then great, you're back. They're back in the game. They can get right back in it. And it doesn't take forever. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it takes children that are very upset a while to calm down, but we can acknowledge and notice when they're really working hard to calm themselves down. And that in a turn, like, kind of hijacks them into finding the positive, because I mean, that the ultimate goal is to have them have inner wealth and be stronger on the inside so that they can make good choices and they can learn how to regulate their feelings. I mean, that's what being an adult is, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the goal, basically.
Cool. Okay, thank you. That even has given me an even better understanding of it. I know we've talked about it, but you know, like any human, I need to hear it multiple times. So you said you started using it in preschool. So we're talking kids 2, 3, 4 5 years old, right? Up until kindergarten. But you're with us in ParenTween Connection because clearly it's not only applicable to preschoolers.
Right.
So how does this show up? Let's say like in elementary school, what are some of the examples of like parents or teachers, right? Because you used it in an educational setting. So it's not just for parenting. Situations that we could see in elementary school, because I know we have folks, I mean, we say ParenTween, but I know we've got families lurking who have younger ones.
Right.
Can you walk us through like what that might look like? One of the stands in elementary school versus middle school versus high school or something like that.
Okay. So let's say you have a child who doesn't like want to do chores or do anything, you know, like I hear this a lot. Like people are like, well, I'm trying to get them to do this and they don't do it. And I have to nag them. And every time they don't do it, I like say something. I'm like, well, why are you saying it when they're not doing it? Because that's watering the weeds. Like, why don't you water the flowers? Like, what do you want to grow? What behaviors do you want to continue? And so when you see them doing those things, and first of all, no child or person ever is always doing the wrong thing. That's just not true. So we have to start looking at ways to find the positive. And a lot of times as parents, and teachers, we like when someone's doing the right thing, we kind of ignore it because we're like, oh, well, that's what they're supposed to be doing. So I don't need to say anything.
Right. That's the way it should be.
Right. This is the opposite of that. So instead of like ignoring what they're supposed to be doing or just being like, oh, okay, that's what they're supposed to be doing, so I'm not going to say anything, that's when you say something. So if you notice your child gets up from the table and takes their plate to the, kitchen counter, you say, wow, you just got up and took your plate to the counter.
Without me having to ask you.
Yeah, I didn't have to ask you. You have like that. You took initiative. You're helpful, considerate, and then you just start loading it in. Start noticing those little things, and you'll get more of those little things. And that's just like, especially for that age, and teenagers. A lot of times, sometimes they feel uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about things or whatever. So sometimes, a lot of times I just do like what I call a drive-by, and I'll just like walk by their room and I see they're reading a book or whatever. I see they're doing their homework. I'll just say, you're doing your homework. And then that just is, and then just walk away. Like, there's nothing they can argue with about that because they were doing their homework, and it's the truth of the moment. You're showing them that they're being successful in the moment. You're showing them by what's actually happening. And so they then feel seen for doing that. They get your energy for doing that. Right. Instead of you having to yell, well, you didn't start your homework, blah, 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 whatever.
Right.
And so then they feel like terrible because, so now you're doing it the opposite. Like just whatever you were going to do before, do the opposite.
Okay. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's not so easy, right?
It's not, no, because you have to like Okay, so when we were talking about how a reset is when, you ask your child to reset if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing or something,
Mhm.
you have to reset yourself before any words come out of your mouth. If you're
Mhm.
feeling like triggered by this behavior, you have to stop,
Great.
take a deep breath, regulate your own feelings, come from a
Mhm.
place of the heart. Like, what is it that you want to happen in this moment? Do you want to make them feel bad? Do you want to win? Do you want to be the winner of this argument?
Oh,
Or do
that's
you want
interesting.
them to learn that they're a good person, they can do these things on their own
Mhm.
and they're capable, and do you want to have a good relationship, right?
I like that you brought up the concept of winning because
Mhm.
oftentimes it does feel like a battle,
Yeah,
battle of wills, maybe
right.
over chores, or
Yeah,
battle of why doesn't my kid understand how important grades are for college?
right.
Something like that. Like it can definitely be, or drugs. I've definitely had conversations with parents who are like at their wits end with how to get their kids to stop. Like here in Colorado, pot is legal for adults, but it's still
Yeah,
illegal for kids,
right.
right? So it's like they've got, we've got kids smoking and getting high, and
Yeah,
it becomes this again like a battle of wills. And so
yeah,
there's so many things that, yes, there are fights worth fighting, and then there are fights that maybe aren't worth fighting and maybe don't even need to be a fight in the first place, right?
right. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about chores, we talked
Mhm.
about grades, we talked about really looking for the good.
Yeah.
So, what if we've got a parent who is just like, my kid is doing everything wrong,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
They're skipping school, they're promiscuous, they're into drinking, they're into drugs, they don't care about their school, or academics. Like, add item here of all the things, right? Because
Right.
oftentimes these things come together,
Yeah.
right? They coincide.
Hmm.
And going back to your point about like no kid is always wrong. No kid
Right.
is always doing everything wrong.
Right.
What are some things that, you mentioned the homework, but like
Yeah.
presume like really tough scenario. What are
Okay.
some of the things that you would suggest to parents to look for that they can fuel this positive energy somehow, some way?
Yeah. Um, okay. So there's also something that we talk about, and it's called hijacking into, because sometimes you're gonna have to wait for very intense kids a very long time to catch them being good, which that's just kind of that's not you can't do that. You have
Mhm,
to find ways, you have to create ways to
mhm,
make them successful. So for example, I'll give a short little story. There was a story of a dad who said his son never listened to him, never, he'd tell him to do one thing and he'd do the opposite. It was just all constant. And so one day after he had had this session with Howard Glasser, he was getting in the car. They were getting in the car, and he told him, just look for ways to create success. So the son was getting in the back seat and he saw him in the rearview mirror, and the son was pulling the door closed, and he knew that he was already too far to like open the door back up again. The door is definitely gonna close. And so he said, and to him, he's like, oh, I'm gonna need you to close that door. And boom, the door closed. And he was like, wow, thank you, you did that like right away, I didn't even have to ask you twice, like that was amazing. And then the next thing, he sees the son putting the seatbelt on, and it was like right to the point where it's not gonna, you can't undo it or whatever. And he says, oh, and I'm gonna need you to put your seatbelt on too. Click. And he's like, wow, that's two things in a row that you just like crushed. Like you did exactly what you're supposed to do. That was amazing. So it's like things like that where you're gonna have to just get really creative with you how successful they are. So maybe they got up and they made themselves breakfast, or
mhm,
like, wow, that shows really how responsible you are. You got up, you were hungry, and you made yourself breakfast. You didn't have to wait for anybody else to tell you what to do. And
mhm,
that's pretty mature of you
mhm,
to be able to do that. Just like any little thing, like, and it's gonna be little things for a
mhm,
while, because there when children are doing things like what you described, They're really not, I don't want to say broken on the inside, but their view of themselves, their portfolio is messed up. Like you have a portfolio of who you think you are, and you put different little things in it, little different pieces of art in there. And when all of them are bad, then that's who you think you are. Do you know what I mean? So you need to start adding things to the portfolio to show them that they are, you know, a worthy human being of taking care of themselves, of, you know, having self-esteem and all of these things that you want them to have. Because right now they don't have those things, and that's why they're doing those things.
For sure. They're looking for that outside validation.
Yeah.
Often, or they're looking, if it's a drug type of deal, trying to have a little bit of escapism or self-medicating potentially. So
exactly.
Awesome. Can you do a recap quickly of the 3 stands, just so our listeners can like plant them?
Okay. So, stand 1, absolute no. I refuse to energize negativity with my energy, connection, or relationship. Stand 2, I absolutely yes. I will absolutely super energize success, and I will energize and nurture firsthand experiences of success. So in the moment. And stand 3, I will be absolutely clear. A toe over the line is a toe over the line, you know, and I'm consistent. So.
Awesome. So I like to round out our roundtable interviews by asking our guests which of our foundations of connection they find most resonant or most pertinent along the way. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the foundations of connection, these actually came out of a conversation that I had with myself a few years ago. I have worked with teenagers for 2.5 decades, and oftentimes they would come to me and talk to me about things that they weren't ready to talk to their parents or their closer family about. And so I sat down with myself and said, why is it that these teenagers, these, you know, high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors usually feel comfortable talking to me about this, but not their parents yet? What is it that I can offer them that their parents may not or aren't able, or whatever the case may be? So I came up with these 10. So in order, the first letter of each one spells out connection. So I'm going to run through them super quick. First is create a safe place, observe, non-judgment, nod and smile, explore. Sometimes I refer to that as educate too. Challenge your truths or curiosity, take your time, innovate, own your own story, and nurture. So I'm curious which one, because they're not linear, you know, they very much overlap. They're all kinds of wacky Venn diagram kind of deal. But which one pops out for you today, Lisa?
Well, I mean, obviously nurture, because that's the nurture heart approach. I mean, you're teaching them how to nurture themselves and be kind to themselves. And also there was when you went back was you said take a breath or something, take slow.
Your time.
Take your time. Yeah. That's something that I thought too, because a lot of times parents will just snap, like, okay, I need this behavior to stop. I'm just going to snap and say the first thing that comes out. But it's like, no, stop, take a breath, take your time, choose your words carefully. Like, think about it for a second. That's the biggest challenge, I think, with this approach, is that being able to just take a step back for a second. I mean, maybe your kids are like brawling on the sofa and you're like, this has to stop right now. Chaos. But you have to stop for a second, like, and really find what's good that's happening here. And you're going to comment on that. Observe, I guess, too. Observe, right?
Like I said, it's a really messy Venn diagram because all the pieces overlap and they're conjoined in many places. So
and then non-judgment, because none of these, they're like, if you were to look at a child and say they're behaving bad, you're putting judgment on this. Well, what if they're really just looking for connection? Like, if you stopped for a second and looked at it differently, like, okay, they're not trying to be bad. They're screaming out for attention. They
Right.
want your connection. And so
Right.
if we look at it that way, they're just a human trying to get connection.
A need filled, right?
Right. So
That's awesome. I love it. All right. For anyone who's listening, if you like what you're hearing from Lisa, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, Lisa is going to offer us another 10 or maybe 12 minutes of her time in the ParenTween Village community, specifically to talk about how to bring more positivity into your home, your world, your life with your teens and your tweens. And you know what? It strikes me, Lisa, so much of this also applies to your relationships with other folks, not just the kids in your life.
100%.
So
Yes.
I'm excited to learn from you, more ways that we can bring positivity in. But you can also find Lisa at lisawoomer.com. That's a pretty straightforward, easy way to find you. Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Lisa, thank you for joining me. And I know we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you.
Have a great one.